Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our webinar. My name is Boussa Rabia and I work as an English teacher in Unidol Schools at Sanjak Tepe campus. Today we have a very special guest who will be talking to us about her journey in meeting Islam. Let's welcome Jenny Divleli. Jenny Divleli is a graduate from American Sign Language Interpretation. In her 20s, she met with Islam and later in her life married with a Turk. We are looking forward to listening to her inspirational story. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to write your questions in the question box, and at the end of the webinar, we will be having a question-answer session. Enjoy!
Are we good? Can I? Assalamu alaikum, everyone. As you've just heard, my name is Jenny Divleli, and I'm really happy to be with you guys tonight and to speak to you and tell you a little bit about my journey to Islam. So I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about my life before Islam, and then I will tell you how I became Muslim, inshallah. So I was born and raised in Canada. My parents are both Canadian and I have one brother, and we were raised in a Christian home. And my family was quite practicing, and I was very, very involved in the Christian church and Christian youth groups growing up. And that was a very big part of my life. And in Canada, we had I had a lovely childhood. My dad is a police officer. My mother is a nurse, and I have one brother who he and I are very close, but my brother is disabled. So I always grew up with an interest in helping people with disabilities and working within the community that experienced disabilities and different challenges and whatnot. So because of that, I ended up going into university to become a sign language interpreter. And in university, I was also volunteering in a program to help other students on campus. So if they had any difficulties, then they could come to us and we could try and support them and direct them into the correct services on university campus. So while I was in this program, there also happened to be a Muslim in the program. And at that time, I didn't even realize the person was Muslim. I didn't know anything about Islam. As I said, I was raised in a Christian home and a Christian family. And actually in university, I decided to kind of take a break from faith. I didn't abandon belief, but I wasn't really sure what I believed or how I wanted to practice religion. And I kind of started just experimenting in different areas and different philosophies about faith and religion. But with never any intention of changing my faith. So like I said, I met a Muslim, and at that time it was after 9/11, and the only thing that I kind of knew about Islam was anything that had ever been presented to me on the media, which of course was all whatever they wanted me to believe, right? So I had a very wrong understanding of Islam. And so I remember, first of all, learning that this other volunteer in the program was Muslim and being surprised because this person didn't really seem what I thought like a Muslim would be like based on what I had seen on the media. And that year, I was in my third year of university. That year, my grandparents were in a bad car accident and my grandpa died. And because of that, I had to miss some school. I had to miss some university. And so the people that were in this program that I was volunteering in, some of them wrote me messages just checking in on me and seeing how I was doing and how I was dealing with the loss of my grandfather. As I mentioned, I kind of, in university, I'd gone away from faith, And so then at that time, I decided, well, I think I'm going to go back to the church and I'm going to try and refine my faith to deal with the loss of my grandfather. And so when one of these volunteers, it happened to be the Muslim volunteer in this program, had messaged me, just really by like the will of Allah, I happened to mention that I think now to deal with the loss of my grandfather, I'm going to try and refine faith. I'm going to try and go back to the church and become a good Christian and begin to practice my faith again. And what happened was we ended up having a discussion about the similarities between Islam and Christianity. And as I mentioned, at that time, I really didn't know anything about Islam. I didn't even know that Muslims were the people who practiced Islam. And so I remember in my first conversation with this person, and I started to learn that the prophets of Christianity and the prophets of Islam were the same, how shocked I was. And as I mentioned, I was training to become an American Sign Language interpreter for the deaf. So I was learning sign language. And one of the things as an interpreter is you could work in any sort of situation. One day you might be in a doctor's appointment, the next day you might work at a school, and then the next day you might be in a church or a mosque. And I remember thinking like, wow, I really don't know anything about Islam. What if one day I have to interpret in a mosque? How am I ever going to interpret if I don't know anything about this faith? I better learn something to try and just be a better person and to be a better interpreter. So I made the decision to start to read a little bit about Islam just to be a better person and to try and understand what this faith was. And so I started to get a book, and then at the same time, I also started working at a new sports club, and I was the secretary there, and there was a family that started coming, and they were a Syrian family, and I understood that they were Muslim because there was one day that they went to order some food, and they specifically had asked that the pizza didn't have any pork on it, it didn't have any pepperoni on it. And it was one of the things that I had learned as I was reading was that Muslims don't eat pork. And so I asked them, I said, oh, are you Muslim? And I'm learning about Islam. And this family became very, very excited. And so the man, the brother, he started to say like, oh, come to our home and, you know, come to the mosque with us. And he would bring me books and he would bring me information. And he was very, very excited to tell me all about Islam. And he was always inviting me to their home and to spend time with them. And he was the person who gave me my first Quran. Actually, it was the Syrian brother who was with his family when they were at this sports club. And in the meantime, I was also still, I was writing emails and asking questions from the person that was in the program with me, this volunteer program. And what happened was the more I began to learn about Islam and the more that I began to research, the more that I realized I started to have problems with Christianity. And I started to question things about Christianity. And eventually, the more I was learning and the more that I was researching, I got to a point where one evening I was alone in my house and I just made a dua. I prayed to Allah and I said, Allah or God, I don't know who you are. Well, I believe in you, but I don't know if you are Allah of Christianity or Allah of Islam. And I said, like, whatever is truth, show that to me. If you are God of Christianity, make that clear. And if you are God of Islam, make that clear. Show me which is truth. And I made this dua. And then pretty much after I made that dua, Allah just started opening doors for me and making really crazy things happen. And I know that sounds like crazy or like it's going to be some sort of big sign, but really I think what I really learned was that a sincere prayer, a true intention, a true request of Allah is never denied. That's the message here. And so when I made this dua, shortly afterwards, I was able to meet some Muslim women. I went to the mosque. I did go to the mosque, and I met some Muslim women there that became good friends of mine. And one of the husbands was an imam, and he started to be able to help teach me about Islam. And then I met other really amazing Muslims and people that were helping me and answering questions. And on the other side, I had some really crazy experiences with Christians who my whole life I had been Christian, but all of a sudden they were being really, I just saw things that I didn't like. I saw behaviors that I just didn't think were consistent with how Christians should be living their life, or how God is even asking us to live our life. And so slowly, I started to realize that I had some problems with Christianity. And then one day, I also started to feel like, okay, I need to learn how to pray. And I wasn't Muslim. I hadn't given my Shahada. But for some reason, this was a feeling that felt really, really important to me. And so I made dua. I was like, okay, I don't know how to speak Arabic. I don't know what these words mean. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but like, I feel like I need to learn how to pray. And so I did. I got a book, and my friend's husband tried to teach me the first surahs, like Al-Fatiha and Falaq and Nas, so I could pray. And I remember staying in my house with a book, and it would take me 45 minutes to pray Fajr, like Sabah namaz, and learning how to pray by myself, not even being Muslim. But I still couldn't become Muslim. I was not ready to become Muslim. And I didn't tell my family that I was looking into Islam. And I was living by myself in a house in a different city. So my family didn't know I was looking into Islam. I also didn't tell my friends because, as I mentioned, at that time, Islam and Muslims, I mean, still like today, they weren't very openly received. People didn't look at Islam very fondly. They didn't love it. And so I was very afraid of telling people that I was looking into this religion. And the other thing is that I knew that if I became Muslim, I wanted to become Muslim in the best way possible. And I wanted to do what Allah wanted me to do. And so I started to think about wearing hijab. And at that time, wearing hijab seemed impossible. So I thought, okay, I'll look into Islam, I will learn some things, but if it means wearing hijab, I can't do it. But I continued to learn, and I wanted to learn how to pray, and I kept making dua, and I kept reading. And slowly, I started to realize that I didn't feel like I could accept Christianity anymore. And I was slowly starting to feel more and more like I was Muslim. And I had started to read the Quran, and I had set a goal that I wanted to read the whole Quran in English. So I was reading the Quran in English, and I was making these dua. And then finally I got to a point where I realized that I had some questions, some serious questions that I needed to get answered. So at the university that I was going to, there was a Christian pastor. And the Christian pastor, he worked right there on campus. And I made an appointment with him. And I went to him and I said, look, I've been looking into Islam, and I have all these questions about Christianity. And if you cannot answer them, I feel like I'm going to become Muslim. And I remember telling him this and asking all of these questions to him. And at the end of our session, he just said to me, you know, this is what faith is. You just have to believe. Something there's no answers for, and you just have to believe. And I remember being so devastated because I told him if he didn't help me, if he didn't give me answers, that I was going to change my faith. And he couldn't give me any answers. He really couldn't. And he just kept saying, you just have to believe. But in the meantime, I had been researching this religion, and I had been reading the Quran, and I had seen that, and I had learned that Allah promises to protect his word and to protect his religion. And even in the Bible, even in Christianity, Christians believe that the word of God is sacred, that we protect it, that it is protected. But there was no original Bible anymore. And here was the Quran that had been unchanged for 1400 years. And that was huge for me. And I remember thinking, like, God promises he will protect his word. God promises he will protect his faith. And this is what this is. This is what the Quran is. It is his word protected. And if I believe that this is his word, then I must believe what it says inside. And if I believe what it says inside is from Allah, is true, then I must do those things. And this is how I was feeling, and it felt like proof, and it felt real. And then I looked onto Christianity, and they couldn't give me answers, and I felt like the proof was right in front of me. So that same weekend that I went to go talk to the pastor at my university, there was a conference at my university put on by the Muslim Students Association. And the Muslim Student Association is just kind of like a club for Muslims, but for university students. So there was a conference, and they brought in a speaker from England. And he was very popular at the time, and it was very, very exciting. Everybody in our community really wanted to meet him and really wanted to talk to him and ask him questions. And I remember on a Friday night, the conference started on a Friday, and he gave his opening lectures, and everybody was there. And then at the end of the night, I went up to him and I said, "Assalamu alaikum, I have some questions. I'm looking into Islam and I have some questions." And I remember he still makes me so emotional that he invited me to sit down with him and to talk with him all evening, and he just let me ask him any question I had. And I asked him the same questions that I asked the pastor earlier in the weekend, but this Imam, he was able to give me every answer that I wanted. And the other amazing thing was, it wasn't the answer from a Muslim perspective. It wasn't the Muslim answer. This man, he was also a scholar of comparative religion, and he had researched Christianity, and he himself was also a convert. He had practiced, I think, Buddhism for a while, and he was raised in a Christian family, and then he became Muslim. So one of his areas of expertise was comparative religion, Christianity and Islam. So he answered my questions basically from the point of the Christian history books. So when I sat there and asked all these questions and he gave me these answers, I just thought, like, wow, this is exactly what I was waiting for. This is what I wanted to hear. And that evening, after the conference was finished that night, I drove him, and there was a couple other people in the community. I drove them to where they were staying, and we continued talking. And he said, "Do you believe that there is only one God?" And I said, "Yes, I believe that. That's no problem." And he said, "And do you believe that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his final messenger?" And I said, "Yeah, like, I think that makes sense. Like, that seems to make the most sense, that he's just another prophet like the other prophets." And then he said, "Okay, go make wudu and go make your ablution, and then come here and you're going to give shahada." And I was like, no, whoa, like, that is not happening, not ready for this. And it was Friday night, and he insisted. He's like, like, basically what you said makes you a Muslim. You just have to say it. And what if you go home tonight and you're in a car accident? And what if something happens? Like, you have to say your shahada. And I couldn't. And the reason I couldn't was because I was still so afraid about what everybody else would say and what was going to happen afterwards. And what would my family say? And what would my friends say? And because the other thing is remember, I told you I had been making dua about hijab. And it was really important to me that if I become Muslim, that I put on hijab. Because I didn't want to be like the Christians I had seen that say they believe and they say that this is important to them, but then they didn't live by their faith. And I wanted to know and I wanted to practice that if I believe the Quran is true, and if I believe that it is the word of God, then how could I deny it? And if Allah tells me to wear hijab, then I have to do it. And that was the way that I wanted to live my life if I was Muslim. But that was so scary. And at the time, because I hadn't told anybody I was looking into Islam, my friends didn't know. My family didn't know. My boss didn't know. So in my mind, I was like, how today am I going to have no hijab? And then tomorrow I'm going to have one. And then how am I going to deal with all of the questions and all of the criticisms and all of everybody asking me everything? And I just didn't feel ready. So I promised the imam, I said, look, today is Friday. This conference is continuing until Sunday. I said, if I feel the same on Sunday, I will become Muslim. But I need some time to think about it. I need some time to just settle in with the idea. And so that evening, I went home and I made dua and I phoned a couple friends also, some very close girlfriends. And I told them. And I said, look, I'm looking into Islam and I think I'm going to become Muslim. And I was very scared because especially one of them was a very, very, very practicing Christian. I was very worried that if I told her this, that she would stop being my friend. And so I told them, I think I'm going to become Muslim, but I wanted to tell you. And they supported me and they were shocked and they didn't necessarily understand my choice, but they were supportive. And then I also messaged a couple of the Muslims in the community and told them that I felt like I was ready to become Muslim. And the weekend continued and Sunday came and I gave my Shahada at this conference and I became Muslim on May 14th of 2006. And that was the day that I also put on hijab. And the day that my life changed, of course. And alhamdulillah, I was able to become Muslim at a conference surrounded by a lot of other Muslims. So I was immediately welcomed into the community. And I had a lot of support from the people that were there. And then after that, I had to make decisions about how I was going to tell my family. And so as I told you, I didn't live in the same city as my family. And they didn't know that this is a decision that I was thinking about or something that I had done. And although my close friends in the same city that I went to school with knew, my other friends from different places and different times in my life, of course, I hadn't told them. So I decided I was going to wait a little while before I told my family because I wanted to feel stronger and feel like I could better explain myself to them and be more confident in how I was going to tell them. So I waited a little while. And actually what ended up happening is one of my neighbors phoned and told my family. And at least told my brother. So my brother didn't hear from me. So that was very upsetting. And he was very upset and very hurt. And then when I told my family, although the first conversation we had, they were trying to be supportive. If you remember, my dad is a police officer, or he was at the time. And so my dad, after we hung up the phone, he went ahead and he wrote me a letter. And he basically went to the first website that he found about Islam. And of course, it was all wrong information. It was a Christian website telling him all these wrong things about Islam, about what a horrible religion and hateful religion, and Islam is terrorism, and Islam is like a religion of terrorists. It was a whole website like that. And he printed the whole website and he put it in an envelope and he sent it to me. And with a letter that he wrote about how he was disappointed and he was upset about my decision. And my mom, on the other hand, my parents were divorced at the time. And then my mom, she was worried about my rights as a woman. And she had watched a movie, it's called Not Without My Daughter. And it's about an American woman who marries a Muslim. And in America, their life is very happy. But then they move overseas to a Muslim country. And the man changes and the woman gets kidnapped and her child gets kidnapped. And anyway, it's some silly Hollywood movie. And that was my mom's whole experience with Islam, was this movie. So when I told my mom that I had become Muslim, my mom was so frightened and so devastated because she was so worried that my life would be like that I would be kidnapped, that I would never have rights, that I would never, if I had children, they would be taken away from her. It was like she was just worried that my life was going to become this Hollywood movie. And I kept trying to explain to her that that I don't think so. Like, I don't think that was going to happen. And I've researched this well, and the community members that I know are lovely, and you know, that's just a movie. But of course she was very concerned. And the other thing is that when I was in university, I was a very, very active women's rights activist. And I was very outspoken and very independent. And so my mom felt like it was a very big change for me. And how could I go from being an outspoken feminist women's rights activist to being Muslim? And she was trying to kind of make that connection, and she was struggling with it. I told a bunch of my friends. I wrote an email, basically, actually, is how I told most of my friends that weren't living close to me. And many of them decided that we couldn't continue to be friends. I lost some friends, which at the time was really difficult. But also, you know, now when I think about it, I realize that Allah is the best of planners, because when you have nothing else, when you're all alone, when you don't have family, and when you don't have friends, you always have Allah. And when I first became Muslim, my life was very lonely. And I didn't have my family support. And although I had a couple friends who, alhamdulillah, they still continued to be my friends, I lost a lot of friends. I was experiencing a new way of living, a new life, a new culture. I also, at university, my teachers took me aside and they had an intervention. They were like, we're really worried about you. What's happened to you? I had to have a special meeting at university. So I felt like I lost a lot of my school support. So in that loneliness, in those moments of feeling I had no one else to turn to, I really realized like the beauty of the relationship with Allah and how Allah is my strength and is our strength. And that when we are sincerely seeking Allah, He is always there to help us. And so now, as when I think about it, about how difficult that time was, I'm so thankful for that time. Because I think that if it was different, that my faith wouldn't have been as strong. So I became Muslim in May, and then I ended up having conversations with one of the Muslims that I had met early on, and decided to get married. And then that was also a huge shock to my family because in Canada, that's not what happens. Normally, of course, in Canada, people, they date for many years and they get engaged and they're engaged for many years. And within a matter of months, I decided I wanted to get married. And then people started to think, oh, okay, well, the only reason that you became Muslim is because you wanted to get married, which of course was not the case. And I wanted to get married because I wanted to learn how to be a better Muslim, and I felt like I needed help with that. And so, alhamdulillah, I was married in August of the same year. My family did not come to my wedding. And again, it felt very lonely. But alhamdulillah, it was the start of something different and something new. And slowly, even though the beginning was very difficult, I was able to start a life that was very beautiful with my new family and with my Muslim community. And eventually my family, after many discussions and after that they saw that I was safe and after they saw that I was happy, they slowly started to come around and be more supportive of my decision. And I think after they saw that I was certain in my decision. And so my husband is Turkish, and we traveled to Turkey later that year, and we had a wedding here with his family, who I had never met. And then my mom came to that wedding. So my mom slowly started to be more receptive to my decision. And alhamdulillah, now things with my mom are very, very good. Things with my dad are also good. They're much better. But it's taken a while to get there. So that is pretty much how I became Muslim. It's not the most exciting story, convert story, but it's how it happened. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to ask or to answer any of them. My life is an open book, and it could be about how I became Muslim. It could be about something afterwards that you're wondering. I also am really happy just to talk about maybe questions you have about Islam. So if there's something you're experiencing or you're feeling or you're wondering, I'm not a scholar, but I'm really like, maybe I can help you find an answer to some of those things. So if that's a question you want to ask, I am happy to answer them as well.
That was a really emotional story, and there are a few questions, and I don't know how you would prefer me to ask them. Would you like to go one by one, or should I ask them all together?
Let's do one by one.
Okay, however you feel comfortable. So our first question is, if something unexpected didn't happen to believe, would you do the same again?
I mean, I want to believe, I mean, Allah always, I mean, it's written about who will become Muslim, right? So I think if the door hadn't opened to have that conversation because of the death of my grandfather, I believe some other way it would have opened, right? Because Allah has destined me to be Muslim. So I think that I was receptive enough to the idea and open-minded enough to learn about different faiths that I believe that I would have researched it somehow, that I would have been exposed to it at some stage, and that I would have drawn the same conclusion. Because even after my grandfather died and I started researching Islam, I never had the intention to become Muslim. I just wanted to learn about Islam. I just wanted to be a better person. I thought I was going to become a better Christian, but Allah had a different plan. So yeah, I think that somewhere down the road, there would have been a time when I read an article or I read a book or something would have happened, and that I would have thought, hey, I need to learn more about this. Because my grandfather didn't die and I say, okay, now I need to research Islam. My grandfather's death led to a conversation. And that conversation led to me reading a book, and that reading a book led to me making a bunch of decisions. So I think, yeah, as I said, my intention was never to be Muslim. That was Allah's plan. So I think I would have become Muslim.
MashaAllah. Well, everyone has a turning point, and I think your grandfather's death was your turning point in life. Our second question is, what is the hardest thing to change for you after you became Muslim, like regarding mentally, culturally, maybe even your character, your personality? How did your family and friends see you after that? Like, did they think you changed dramatically after your conversion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so, I mean, I'll try and answer this question like in two parts. So the hardest thing, first of all, I think for me at that time, probably realistically, as a Western, right? Putting a hijab on was difficult. Changing the way I dressed was difficult. Those were new things, right? Those are the obvious things. They were challenges. Like, let's be real, you know, like wearing long sleeves in the summer is not as convenient as going around in a sleeveless shirt, right? Those are challenges. But I mean, I think one of the other challenges was that it definitely meant a lifestyle difference for me. So, I mean, you guys, I became Muslim in university. So I had a lot of friends, and there was a lot of parties, and there was a lot of this kind of like university life, especially in the West, if you think about what that looks like. So it meant that I didn't do those things anymore. I didn't go to those parties. I didn't go to pubs. I didn't drink. I didn't go near alcohol. I didn't partake in a lot of the festivities that my friends took part in, sporting games, concerts, like all of these things that were a part of my life that often also revolved around alcohol and different kind of situations where as a Muslim, I no longer felt comfortable. So that was a challenge, of course. But, you know, Allah promises that when we close one door and when we give something up for the sake of Allah, that He promises He will give us something better. That is His promise. And so even though there was changes and I felt like I had a lot of difficulty, I also gained a lot of amazing friendships. And I gained a new community, and there was lots of new gatherings and halakas and sohbets and events with Muslim women, and I gained a new community. So although there was differences and there was a change, in the end, that loss was filled with something else and something much better. And how did my family react, and how did my friends react? As I said, some of them, they just flat out said, like, we can't talk anymore. We can't, we need space. We don't understand your decision. My dad and I had a very difficult time at the beginning, trying to understand one another and to find common ground. And I think that just took time. A lot of that was their fear of Islam. I think that they were very afraid that I would be somebody different. And I think that they were very worried that I would try and push Islam on them. That because I was now Muslim, that somehow it meant that I was going to feel like they had to be Muslim. And of course, I make dua that one day they become Muslim. But I think that it was just the fear of the unknown. And eventually, over time, when they saw that I was still very much the same person, that I still was the same daughter or the same friend, and that I still loved a lot of the same things, hiking, camping, playing sports, going to the gym, hanging out with my friends, being a part of the community, art, like all of the things I was interested in before. I think that when they saw that I could still do those things, still experience them, still be Jenny, then they became more relaxed. Because you have to appreciate, I had been looking into Islam for months, but they didn't look into Islam at all. It was just one day, all of a sudden, they looked at me and I looked very, very, very different. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't doing things I used to do. So I think over time, they realized I was very much the same person, and that just took time.
Well, you know, leaving something that you're really used to, your lifestyle, and then moving on to something much more new, and you know, giving up things that you used to love, like you said, partying, going to concerts, and involving things in your life that your religion doesn't accept anymore. It must have been really hard. Like, how was it really hard to give up on them? How did your friends and family react when all of a sudden you're like, you know, I'm not gonna do these things anymore, let's just do things that involve like going to a cafe or maybe to a cinema?
Yeah, I mean, as my mom and dad, as I mentioned, we didn't live in the same city. So I think for them, a lot of their initial concerns came from the fact they couldn't see the changes. They couldn't visit me on the weekend. They couldn't see me on a day-to-day basis, right? So their mind was like, oh my gosh, like, what's it going to be like? And they couldn't imagine what it was going to be like. And so I think that their fear, especially with my family, made it really difficult. Wine was a really big part of my home, especially with my dad. And so I think, you know, initially he was concerned about how that was going to affect him, because I specifically said I wouldn't be at their house if they were drinking alcohol. And these kinds of things, like him feeling like what was gonna happen to him in his life, and how is that gonna affect him, or these kinds of things, right? And of course, now they're non-issues. We've talked about it, right? We don't see each other often enough that like it's not an issue. But at those times, it was just like, well, what do you mean? Well, what's that like? Or why do I have to change because you changed? And like, why do your decisions have to affect me? And these kinds of things that they just took time, right? And with my friends, you know, what I really learned, and this is a lesson for us all in all situations, is that the friends that are really important, the friends that really should be a part of your life, it's not going to matter about whether you're Muslim or whether you look a certain way or you're from a different culture or whatever the decisions you make in your life, that your true friends are going to be your true friends no matter what. And what I learned over time is that the friends that had a really difficult time adjusting to my decisions, or wanted to continue to try and push me back into making decisions that were against the way I wanted to live my life as a Muslim, I didn't need them in my life. They weren't the type of people that I wanted to be around, right? And that the people that were really important to me and the friends that were really important to me, that they respected my decision enough to love me no matter what. And those are the people that I'm still friends with. And those were the women that specifically, for example, you know, when I became Muslim, went out and bought me headscarves. Or, you know, if I was at school and the wind blew my scarf, you know, they'd fix my scarf for me, right? Like these were the people that they wanted to support me and they wanted to love me no matter what I looked like or no matter what my faith was, right? And those are the kinds of friends that we need to have no matter what. So again, like this wasn't all an overnight thing. It took time and it took patience. And I also needed to respect and to understand that as much as it was difficult for me and I felt lonely, my family was also grieving. They also felt like they had experienced loss. They felt like their daughter had abandoned the things that they'd taught her. And I needed to make space for that feeling, for them to experience that. And so it was really important to me And then also later on when I was married to my husband as well, that we always try to show my family and show our friends love and acceptance. And the best example of this, of course, is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the way that he treated people. And so we always just tried to talk about that and imagine what he would have done and how he would have acted in such situations, and to make room for their questions and for their feelings as well, because my family was experiencing pain and loss.
I'd really like to thank you for such a lovely story about how your life changed. And to be honest, a lot of Muslims now these days really need to hear inspirational stories like this, because we do tend to, I mean, we're born into Muslim families, and sometimes we tend to take our religion for granted, you know, overseeing the beauties that it has actually granted us. And I hope, you know, this will touch the hearts of our watchers, and I'm really thankful for hearing such a lovely story, and inshallah, you know, you will continue to touch the hearts of everyone else that follows you and hears your story. Thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure. I really appreciate being invited tonight. And, you know, I just want to emphasize that like any good that comes from this is from Allah, and none of it is from me. And if I've spoken in error, that Allah forgives me for that. And yeah, I guess I just want to emphasize that, you know, Islam is a beautiful thing, and it's a gift, and it's something that we shouldn't take for granted. And it's okay to feel uncertain about things, but we need to always know that Allah is there, and if we make true, sincere dua to Him, He will always answer our duas. And just like I experienced loneliness, and then felt Allah close in that moment, just remind yourself that if you are feeling or experiencing loneliness as a Muslim, that Allah is always there. And these are really interesting times for us in these day and ages, and I understand all of those because that was something that I've lived that life. I've experienced that. And one thing that I can say with certainty, like complete certainty, is that Islam is truth. And so I really do hope that for all of the youth that are watching tonight, and adults as well, that yeah, we don't take our faith for granted, and we know that it's okay to be Muslim and to also be an athlete and an artist and a scientist and any of the other things that you want to be. Those things, they are not mutually exclusive. We can be Muslim and still achieve all of our dreams, and we can still be Muslim and do all of the things that we love, and there's space for that. And to be proud of your Muslim identity, it's not something that we have to shy away from. Because Islam is a gift, and we should share that gift.
Thank you so much again. We hope to see you again on different platforms. May Allah be with you and the rest of us.
Inshallah, Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.